Hello, welcome to Learning Studio. While studying psychology, philosophy, or any other science-related subjects, you must have the question, is psychology a science? Or, what is science? Then you must be curious about, what is rationalism? What is empiricism? What is scientific theory? What is scientific law? What is determinism? So, this video will answer all your questions. Let's begin this video. At various times in history, influential individuals such as Galileo and Kant have claimed that psychology could never be a science because of its concern with subjective experience. Many natural scientists still believe this, and some psychologists would not argue with them. How a history of psychology is written will be influenced by whether psychology can be considered a science. To answer the question of whether psychology is a science, however, we must first attempt to define science. What is science? Science came into existence as a way of answering questions about nature by examining nature directly rather than by depending on church dogma, past authorities, superstition, or abstract thought processes alone. From science's inception, its ultimate authority has been empirical observation, that is, the direct observation of nature. But there is more to science than simply observing nature. To be useful, observations must be organized or categorized in some way, and the ways in which they are similar to or different from other observations must be noted. After noting similarities and differences among observations, many scientists take the additional step of attempting to explain what they have observed. Science, then, is often characterized as having two major components: one, empirical observation, and two, theory, according to Hall. These two aspects of science can be seen in the earliest efforts of humans to understand their world. Men are ever engaged in the dual activity of making observations and then seeking explanations of the resulting revelations. All normal men in all times have observed the rising and setting of the sun and the several phases of the moon. The more thoughtful among them have then proceeded to ask the question, why? Why does the moon wax and wane? Why does the sun rise and set? And where does it go when it sets? Here we have the two essential elements of modern science. The making of observations constitutes the empirical or factual component, and the systematic attempt to explain these facts constitutes the theoretical component. As science has developed, specialization, or division of labor, has occurred. Some men have devoted their time mainly to the making of observations, while a smaller number have occupied themselves with the problems of explanation. A combination of rationalism and empiricism. What makes science such a powerful tool is that it combines two ancient methods of attaining knowledge: one, rationalism, and two, empiricism. The rationalist believes that mental operations or principles must be employed before knowledge can be attained. For example, the rationalist says that the validity or invalidity of certain propositions can be determined by carefully applying the rules of logic, whereas the empiricist maintains that the source of all knowledge is sensory observation. True knowledge, therefore, can be derived from or validated only by sensory experience. After centuries of inquiry, it was discovered that, by themselves, rationalism and empiricism had limited usefulness. Science combined the two positions, and knowledge has been accumulating at an exponential rate ever since. The rational aspect of science prevents it from simply collecting an endless array of disconnected empirical facts, because the scientist must somehow make sense out of what he or she observes. Theories are formulated. A scientific theory has two main functions. One, it organizes empirical observations, and two, it acts as a guide for future observations. The latter function of a scientific theory generates confirmable propositions. In other words, a theory suggests propositions that are tested experimentally. If the propositions generated by a theory are confirmed through experimentation, the theory gains strength. If the propositions are not confirmed by experimentation, the theory loses strength. If the theory generates too many erroneous propositions, it must be either revised or abandoned. Thus, scientific theories must be testable, that is, they must generate hypotheses that can be validated or invalidated empirically. In science, then, the direct observation of nature is important, but such observation is often guided by theory. The search for laws. Another feature of science is that it seeks to discover lawful relationships. A scientific law can be defined as a consistently observed relationship between two or more classes of empirical events. For example, when X occurs, Y also tends to occur. By stressing lawfulness, science is proclaiming an interest in the general case rather than the particular case. Traditionally, Science is not interested in private or unique events but in general laws that can be publicly observed and verified. That is, a scientific law is general and, because it describes a relationship between empirical events, it is amenable to public observation. The concept of public observation is an important aspect of science. All scientific claims must be verifiable by any interested person in science. There is no secret knowledge available only to qualified authorities. There are two general classes of scientific laws. One class is correlational laws, which describe how classes of events vary together in some systematic way. For example, scores on intelligence tests tend to correlate positively with scores on creativity tests. With such information, only prediction is possible. That is, if we knew a person's score on an intelligence test, we could predict his or her score on a creativity test, and vice versa. A more powerful class of laws is causal laws, which specify how events are causally related. For example, if we knew the causes of a disease, we could predict and control that disease. Preventing the causes of a disease from occurring prevents the disease from occurring. Thus, correlational laws allow prediction, but causal laws allow prediction and control. For this reason, causal laws are more powerful than correlational laws and thus are generally considered more desirable. A major goal of science is to discover the causes of natural phenomena. Specifying the causes of natural events, however, is highly complex and usually requires substantial experimental research. It cannot be assumed, for example, that contiguity proves causation. If rain follows a rain dance, it cannot be assumed that the dance necessarily caused the rain. Also complicating matters is the fact that events seldom, if ever, have a single cause. Rather, they have multiple causes. Questions such as, what caused the Second World War, and what causes schizophrenia, are still far from answered. Even simpler questions such as, why did John quit his job, or why did Jane marry John, are, in reality, enormously complex. In the history of philosophy and science, the concept of causation has been one of the most perplexing. The assumption of determinism. Because a main goal of science is to discover lawful relationships, science assumes that what is being investigated is lawful. For example, the chemist assumes that chemical reactions are lawful, and the physicist assumes that the physical world is lawful. The assumption that what is being studied can be understood in terms of causal laws is called determinism. Taylor defined determinism as the philosophical doctrine that states that for everything that ever happens there are conditions such that, given them, nothing else could happen. The determinist, then, assumes that everything that occurs is a function of a finite number of causes and that, if these causes were known, an event could be predicted with complete accuracy. However, knowing all causes of an event is not necessary. The determinist simply assumes that they exist and that as more causes are known, predictions become more accurate. For example, almost everyone would agree that the weather is a function of a finite number of variables such as sunspots, high-altitude jet streams, and barometric pressure. Yet weather forecasts are always probabilistic because many of these variables change constantly and others are simply unknown. The assumption underlying weather prediction, however, is determinism. All sciences assume determinism. Thus, psychology is a science because it takes the scientific approach to understanding human behavior. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.